They do. But for all of us who are here, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Uh-oh, goodness, that's so rude. I'm gonna turn my settings off. Carl is not gonna be with us today. He had a commitment that he couldn't get out of, so we're sorry he's not here. But the good thing is Andy is recording this. As he does, so he can catch up. And Carrie's new, let's see, Maury is, maybe, Maury, were you at our last meeting? I don't think so. Were you here?
I was not.
Okay.
I've just been sneaking in the background by uploading the videos to YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Zoom lets us do this. So why don't we just go around very quickly and introduce ourselves? Though most people probably know each other, but just for the general group, I'm Felicity Brennan. I'm co-chair of this Santa Fe Rivers Traditional Communities Collaborative. And gosh, we've been going like 9 years now, I guess. And it started back when I was the executive director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association with the Forest Service, and all of you find many of you and many not of you. So anyway, I'm glad. Hi, Ed. Ed, can you hear me?
There's Carol and Kier.
Right. Oh, Ed didn't come on.
It's just
Hi, Carol. Hi, Kier. Okay. Anyway,
Hi,
we're
Felicity.
taking questions. Good morning. And Andy, do you want to do your quick?
Yeah, and I was going to suggest to Felicity, you call on us because everybody's order is different. So I'm Andy Otto, Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association, and I'm the mentee of Felicity from 7 years ago now.
Yes. And he's taken off like a rocket. Jennifer Lindline,
Hey.
Dr. Lindline.
I'm Jennifer Lindline. I'm a geology professor at New Mexico Highlands University and the head of the Natural Resources Management Department. I live in Pecos and serve and sit on the Upper Pecos Watershed Association, but I also support this collaboration where I can, and happy to know you guys.
And Jennifer had a student last year who did a really wonderful one-year study of the Santa Fe, the lower Santa Fe, well, maybe it was the whole river. I guess it was the lower, and provided an incredible report and a lot of information on that. That was great. And may have another student coming up.
Yes.
Do the river, Santa Fe River study. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, how about Maury? She's next on my screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Maury Hensley. I am the program coordinator for Santa Fe Watershed Association, and I've been with the association for a little over a year now. So still getting my feet wet, so to speak, with all of the different programs. So I'm thrilled to finally make it to a live meeting, and I met a lot of you, but the ones I haven't met, nice to meet you today. Thanks for letting me pop in.
It's great to have you, Maury. Thanks for being here. Andrew Erdman, nice to see you.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Andrew Erdman, and I work in the Water Conservation Office over at the City of Santa Fe, and I don't know, it feels like it's been a while since I was at one of these meetings, so I'm glad to be back here.
Thanks for coming. How about Carrie?
Hi, Carrie Olson. I work for Santa Fe County, and I'm the new Santa Fe River project manager. I have a background in watershed management, soil and erosion control, stormwater. I just relocated here to Santa Fe from Wisconsin. So we have a lot of different, and then this was the Driftless area, which is very hilly, a lot of erosion. So a little bit different, but you know, principles are the same. So I'm happy to be a representative of the county today. And so right now for the Greenway, the Santa Fe River Greenway, we have almost completed all the acquisition for Siler Road to San Ysidro crossing, and working on getting that final design going, and then construction will be hopefully 2021.
Yeehaw, that's exciting. Great, thank you for being with us. Bobby.
Yeah, let's see. I am an artist and activist and educator and curator. I do community art projects, largely based on water. And let's see, and I walked the length of the Santa Fe River with Dominique Moiseau, who is also with us in 2012, and Valerie Martinez, and created a beautiful website. We walked from the upper watershed to the Rio Grande in 5 consecutive days. We had amazing support from various people along the river, including Kier and Carol and Ed Siri and Jesusita, among many, many others. Anyway, we learned a huge amount about the river, because when you put your feet down in a place and you're there and you're sleeping there, and you learn a lot about the politics and the history and the river herself. And so anyway, we created a group called Rivers Run Through Us. We're very small right now. We're just Dominique and I. And we are very, very slowly completing a project that is, we're putting up what we call dreaming water houses along the river in different places. The most recent one is going to be installed at the community farm along the river, which is now called Reunity Farm, Reunity Resources. And these little boxes have a clear front. You can, the people who are the sponsors read something about water or about the river. And it's of their choosing, and they take care of the houses. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Nice, thank you, Bobby. How about Dominique?
Hi. Hi. Bobby said it all. She and I are part of Rivers Run Through Us, and I'm so grateful to have, walked the river together and learned so much more about water and all of that. So thank you, Bobby, and I'm glad to be here today.
We're glad you're here. Thank you, Dominique. Erin, good morning.
Hi, good morning. My name is Erin English, and I live on the San Isidro stretch of the Santa Fe River, actually. And I'm a consulting engineer, have a long history in water and wastewater treatment, and have talked with this group and the Watershed Association about the potential for constructed wetlands at the wastewater treatment plant. And a decade or so ago, I think Felicity, you and I worked together with the city on the Living River Ordinance for the flow releases. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for being here this morning. Karen, Carol, good morning.
Morning, Felicity.
Good
Hello,
morning,
everybody.
Felicity. Hi, everybody.
I'm Kier. This is Carol. We're property owners adjacent to the Rael Ranch, which was purchased by BLM in 2011. And they just tried to complete or are working on a management plan for the ranch. And they had a public comment period, which ended about a month ago. So we're waiting to see kind of what happens with all the different alternatives that were proposed from BLM as to what's going to happen with the ranch and the river and all the adjacent land.
And so our land is connected to the Rael Acequia, which is 302 years old. And it's comes from the river, about 1.5 to 1.75 miles long. So our land is above the river, but the acequia runs through it, like Bobby said. And yeah, so we're happy to be here. Hi, everybody.
Great, we're glad to have you here. Good to see you. How
Same
about
here.
William? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm William Mee with Agua Fria Village Association and our Acequia Agua Fria, and also our Agua Fria Well Owners Association. So that, and like this week we had our Acequia meeting, we had our association meeting. It's just like a lot of Zoom going on.
Zooming around. Excellent. Thanks for being here. Rosie Williams. Good
Hey,
morning.
everybody. I'm new to this group. I'm Rosie Williams. I'm the co-director of the Santa Fe Girls School in my second year as directorship. And I am standing in usually my preserve, and I'll kind of explain that for a second, but my preserve teachers, Olivia, Carol, and Melissa Miller, participate in these meetings, but they are teaching as we are winding up the first semester of a very interesting school year. So the Santa Fe Girls School, for those of you who don't know, we own 9 acres down in your area in La Cieneguilla. We've owned the property for about 18 years and have been restoring the land and also working on water samples that are sent to your organizations and others across the state to help manage the health of the river. And we are running programs down there, just so you guys know, full day programs. We have all 3 grades. We're a middle school, 6, 7, and 8. And in this lovely time of COVID, we are using the preserve, which is what we call our 9 acres, as a full outdoor classroom. So we are holding full day classes down there, teaching not only our environmental science program as usual, but math, English, history, conflict resolution, all that stuff. So Olivia and Melissa are down there today doing that very work. And I will be taking notes to make sure that they get the information they need.
And also it's being recorded, Rosie, so they can find it on the website, on Santa Fe Watershed Association website under Lower Watershed, I think it is.
Living Watershed.
Living Watershed, okay. Yeah, so that's even better, yeah. Or in addition to your notes. Great, thank you for being here. It's good to hear that you all are utilizing that area because it's such a valuable and beautiful piece of property. And someday we'd love to, are you still doing water testing every week?
We are, yeah, we're maintaining our program. And like I said, the preserve has been such a blessing in the time of COVID to be able to have the girls together and safe and more than 6 feet apart and learning all year. It has been a huge blessing this semester.
Nice, nice. All right, and then somebody's hiding behind 6901432.
That would be me. That's Rachel Coleman.
Okay, great.
Hello. I'm the chair of the Santa Fe River Commission, and I've attended your meetings the last couple times. I think several of our members have been involved in one way or another in your group, and I think generally we all feel it's our efforts dovetail nicely with your efforts, so we're just trying to get involved and keep up with what's going on with the river. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rachel. I know your introduction got cut off last meeting, so I'm glad to know that's you and you're here, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. Jesse Roach, our guest speaker today. Good morning, Jesse.
Hi, good morning. It's nice to finally be in one of these meetings. I've heard a lot about this group, and I'm happy to be here. I'm the director of City of Santa Fe Water, position I've been in for about 1.5 years. And I think at this point, I've spent more time in my chair at my house than I've spent in my chair at the utility building. So it's interesting times.
Yeah, very, very great. Is that everybody? Ed Siri, I think we lost Ed. He did say he's the grumpy old guy down the river, but also an incredible wealth of knowledge and history. And I'm sorry we've missed him, or he's signed off or something, couldn't quite get on. Okay, so last meeting, I don't know if everybody was there. I know Carol and Kier, you guys weren't there. We had a great overview from Aaron about the possibility of developing some wetlands, possibly to assist with cleaning the water from the wastewater treatment plant. We got into a big discussion about that. And Jesse, I don't know if you were able to watch that. It was an interesting discussion between Bill and Alex and Aaron. And of course, it ties right into the plan that the city is coming up with. But I think it's something that there seems to be some interest in. But if you guys put in an RO system, we're not sure if that's gonna, if it's only going to be able to be mechanically treated, or if a wetlands would have some kind of augmenting possibility in there. And I don't know if that has come to your attention, our interest for the lower watershed for that. If that came about in any discussion, has that been part of your discussion at all?
Not my particular discussion. That's a little bit outside of my sort of wheelhouse that I focus on, but it sounds
Okay.
like very interesting ideas are being considered.
Yeah, good. And we're going to keep track of that through the River Commission. Andy suggested maybe we get together with the River Commission, and Bill suggested maybe getting a proposal together so that when you all put in for your CIP, that maybe there would be planning money. I don't know. We'll see. But there's something moving on that front. So I just wanted to recap that for everybody and let you know that that's happening. But without further ado, Jesse's here with us today to talk about, well, the pipeline and hear from all of you a little bit. And we have a couple questions for Jesse, and we just wanted to know maybe what the status of all that is, Jesse, that affects this group and where you all are in the planning of that, and whatever you can share with us to let us know.
Sure.
Yeah, where you are.
I was kind of focused in a little bit more on sort of city county collaboration on long range planning, and then that certainly goes into the pipeline. Now, I noticed on the agenda you have quite a few items. I actually have slides that I could show. I have about 20 slides. I'm guessing that if I went through them without any questions, it'd be 15 or 20 minutes. But I'm happy to also allow those to have those slides be sort of just a spark for discussion. And then it's up to the group in terms of how long and where we want to spend our time. So I could certainly cut it down a little bit and do less. I am totally at the at the wishes of this group.
Well, why don't you go ahead and do it? We have a pretty small group today, and interestingly, since Ed left, William's and Aaron and Kieran Carroll, yeah, I would say go right ahead and take your 15-20 minutes, and then we can have a discussion with that. We don't have our water plant guys with us to give us an update, so.
Okay, let's see.
Just made it available for you to share. Should be able to.
Okay, let's see. I just lost the ruler. Let me figure out where that went. There we go. It still says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. How's that?
I think we're seeing your screen, Andy.
Are you? I'm not.
I think if you go under, where is it?
I got it. I saw the right button.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, got it. Okay. And so since this is such a small group, I really don't mind people shouting out, like, I didn't understand that. I won't rush through it, but I'll move through this stuff fairly high level, and people can stop me if they're interested in something. Let's see, I was gonna sort of just give a quick overview of the city and the county water utility. That may be something that is all of you guys know, and I could just skip through. There's about 7 slides there. And then I was gonna talk about sort of the active city-county collaboration that we've seen this year. And there's 3 sort of specific pieces that we're working on. One of them is a long-range water resources planning effort. Another one is something called the BDD, the Buckman Direct Diversion Shared Pool. And that feeds into, in some ways, the San Juan Chama return flow pipeline and the El Dorado Canyon Cito pipeline. So that may be where most of the interest is with this group. And I'm happy to kind of glide through this other stuff to get there. I'm happy to skip the utility overview altogether. And then, some ideas at the end on potential implications of these things on the lower Santa Fe River. So if anyone has a strong preference that I just skip the utility stuff, let me know. Otherwise, I'll kind of move through it sort of relatively quickly. So here is the Santa Fe River watershed, the dark blue line. The city of Santa Fe has two sources that come from within the watershed. They're the surface water treated at the Canyon Road Water Treatment Plant and groundwater extracted from the city well field. The city has two more sources that come from outside of the watershed. Those are the Buckman well field and the Buckman direct diversion. The Buckman direct diversion is actually diverting surface water that for both the city and the county. The city's water right portfolio, the water that the city diverts there is all San Juan Chama water, which came from the other side of the Continental Divide.
Shoot, Jesse, you froze up there.
Say again?
Oh, there you're back.
When you were talking about other side of the divide.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, let me know if, oh, I just got your internet connection is unstable warning.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Ruh-roh.
Okay. I will keep going, but shout out if you lose me and I'll double back.
Would it help
So-
if everybody muted? Does that sometimes help?
Yeah.
Everybody,
I don't know. Okay,
Jesse,
so
if
the
your
sound-
screen goes, if your internet connection is bad, you can also try muting your video as a backup.
Okay. So the San Juan Chama water comes from the other side of the divide and is stored in Heron Reservoir and then released as we need it and diverted at Buckman. And that's how most of Santa Fe City's water comes. The county, most of the county's water at Buckman direct diversion is actually native Rio Grande water. This is a very quick, I'll skip through this pretty quickly. This is sort of what Santa Fe's water use has looked over time from 1920s until today. We sort of saw exponential growth in demand from the 20s through the mid 90s. And our supplies couldn't keep up with it. So we were just using the Santa Fe River. Then the 1950s drought came along. We drilled wells in the city well field. That bought us some time, but the demand continued to grow. And in the early 70s, we drilled the Buckman well field. And by the mid 90s, we were using more water from the groundwater than we were from surface water. And we were using more water than for the configuration of those well fields was sustainable long term. In 1995, the city bought what was previously a private water company from PNM and implemented a pretty strong conservation program. And we saw that despite the fact that the city's served customers continued to grow after 1995, the total water use by the city began to decline. And so we've reduced it from 13,000 acre feet in a peak year all the way down. We're now closing in on 8,000 acre feet that the city uses. So that's a success story. The other piece of this is that we were using a whole lot of groundwater, which we think of as our savings account, and we weren't using as much surface water, which we think of as our checkings account. And in the last 10 years with BDD online, we have increased the proportion of surface water that we're using so that now we're using 90% in the last several years surface water and just using enough groundwater to keep our wells ready should we need them. But we're at the moment in a very good position from a water resources perspective. One of the interesting things that comes into play at the wastewater treatment plant is that the San Juan Chama pipeline, which we'll talk about a little bit later more, is specifically looking at trying to fully consume our San Juan Chama water. And so we're keeping track of how much water we use from each of these sources. So for the last 7 years, well, not including 2020, but for the 7 years from 2013 through 2019, we were using about 8,600 acre feet a year in the city, or we were producing that amount, of which about half of it came from the BDD. Half of it was San Juan Chama, and the remaining was Santa Fe River water, a large portion, and a little bit from each well field. What that means is that the amount of water that arrives at the treatment plant is the same proportion of water, roughly. There are some small other sources that come from domestic wells or sources that are non-city served. But generally most of the water in that period, 2013 to 2019, about 2,600 acre feet was San Juan Chama water. A chunk of water is used during the summer from the treatment plant for non-potable reuse. That's about 1,200, 1,300 acre feet per year. And the county system is sort of an extension to some degree of the city system in some areas. So the county obviously has its own water supply at BDD and has transmission lines to move that water supply around to its particular customer base. But it really is sort of a connected transmission and distribution system. So if BDD goes down, then the city provides water to the county. There are a couple of sort of county pipelines that are in the planning phases. The one that we'll talk about a little bit more is the El Dorado Canyon CETA pipeline, but also the Emmett settlement, Joaquin Bay system is also in the planning phases. So that starts to create a utility where it's unknown whether, oops, did I drop off again?
You're fine.
You can hear
You're
me?
good.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. I got the dreaded unstable internet warning again. So it's unclear whether these systems will ultimately at some point be connected, but people have talked about it. And in that scenario, you start to have sort of a city utility, city county water utility that has pipes going everywhere. So within that perspective, it's important that when we start doing long range planning, the city and the county do these things together. So to that point, in terms of the planning that we've done, obviously the city utility has been planning, or not obviously, we have been planning sort of where do we get the next bit of water for as long as we've been a utility. And now I don't remember, maybe Andrew could remind me. I can't remember when the county utility split off from the city utility. But at least in the since 2015, the reports that we have been doing have been in collaboration with the county, and we're going to do that again. Actually, I should clarify. We are working on the county to create a sort of framework for planning that we are both using so that it's consistent. Ultimately, that will create water resources plans that may be independent, like the city will create the water resources plans that it needs, and the county will create the water resources plans it needs. They won't be the same plan, but they will have been built from the same sort of structural foundation. Here is, so some of you were involved in the latest sort of planning cycle that we have proposed is a 5-year planning cycle, of which 2020 was the first year in which we defined the process. And we're working towards having a final sort of 5-year planning process document by the end of this calendar year. And one of the key pieces of that process is to try to engage the public in several sort of areas as we go. So next year, we are talking about developing supply and demand scenarios. What do we think supply and demand will look like for the next 80 years? And engaging public workshops on that. Towards by the end of the year, having these are the scenarios that we're going to plan for. And then the 2022 would be looking at what sort of shortages do we see when we plug these supply and demand scenarios into our models, and what are we going to do about those? So 2023 would be really looking at what we're calling adaptation strategies. If you see a shortage coming, what are you going to do about it? And then finally, by 2024, having sort of a final plan that goes out. In the case of the city, we were directed by the city council to look out to at least 2100. So we'll have scenarios and a plan that goes out 80 years. We won't be actively doing anything about things that we see out 80 years, but we will have been starting to think about them, and we will be acting on the things that we see coming in the next 10 to 20 years. This is a sort of visual representation of sort of just the information flow that will go into that, the things that will need to be developed to come up with supply scenarios. The supply scenario side of things will be heavily science-based. This is going to be the big global climate models and the different regional surface water models coming down to a point where we get an idea of what are the inputs to our system in the next 80 years with climate change. That'll be sort of how we do the supply side. The demand side will be more based on the census data and ideas of how our water use, how we think our water use will or should look in the next 50 or 80 years. Putting those things together, iterating on what are the things we can do in order to come out with, what are our ranked projects and initiatives that we need to start to think about in order to avoid those shortages. One of the things that we did with this first year was we put out a survey and we got 678 responses to the online survey. And those were about half. So you can see this is from part of the online survey. About half of the folks who responded to the online survey self-identified as receiving water from the city. So about half were city customers, about half were not. The postcards, we put those in our utility bills. So those were all city customers. And the demographics were a little skewed compared to the population as a whole. So it represented the folks who did respond to the online survey represented an older demographic. So this is folks in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, representing 2/3 or well more than half of the responses, which is not representative of our community as a whole, but it is representative of the people who have the time and the ability to think about these things. They're also more than half of these folks had a household income over $90,000. That's also greater than we would expect or greater than what is seen in the overall community on average. So right now, well, let's see. Right now, we're working on trying to figure out, is there a way that we can take some of this information on demographics and extrapolate to the broader community to kind of wave our arms at what would be sort of a representative of the responses based on the fact that the folks who responded to the survey were not representative of the community as a whole, but they still brought very interesting information to us. Here's one that's interesting, and this is a hard slide to read, and I apologize for that. We're still struggling with the best way to represent this information, but one of the sort of interesting questions we asked, and it was hard for people, not that many people, there were quite a few people who didn't respond out how we had intended for them to do. But for the folks who did, basically the question that we asked was, here are 6 different things that we want you to rank. We want you to rank them from 1 to 6 as most important to least important. You can't rank them all 1, you can't rank them all 6. You need to use each number 1 through 6 one time. Long-term water supply resiliency was by far the most important. So the orange is people who rank this as number 1. And then for the overall sample size, groundwater levels in the greater Santa Fe area was the second. And that one was interesting to me. And that when we drill in on just city customers, this changes a little bit, and the second one becomes water bill amount. But groundwater levels are important to folks in the community, and I think that's an important takeaway when we start thinking about some of the challenges in La Cienega and other places where the springs are being threatened by groundwater development. So we are working on extrapolating this information if we can and putting it in a kind of a report format that'll be available on our website. And when that's up, we will reach out to everybody who responded to the survey and say, here are the results if you want to come take a look. Okay, so that's the first piece where the city and the county are working together on this new long-range water resources cycle. The second place that I wanted to sort of talk about that the city and the county are working together is in something that we're calling the BDD Shared Pool. And really what this is, one way to think about this is, if instead of there being a city utility and a county utility, what if there was just a big regional utility with the same water resources? What would we do at BDD? And the answer is probably when there was native water available and abundant, we would divert native water. And then when the native water was low and restricted, we would divert San Juan Chama water. So the city and the county have agreed, and the county has signed off on this. The city, it's going to go through our committee process starting next week. And the idea is this shows for this year in January how much water was being used and whose water was being used. So in January, the city was used 300 acre feet of San Juan Chama water, but the city also used 50 acre feet of the county's native water. And meanwhile, the county used its native water also. And so in the early part of the year, in the spring, it was basically the city using its own San Juan Chama water, but the city using more and more, this blue, of the county's native water. And so the county the city was borrowing water from the county in a sense. And so you see that this sort of credit pool was building up where the county, essentially in April, the city owed the county 400 acre feet of water. And by June, the city owed the county 1,000 acre feet of water. But then the flows in the river started to drop, and the water being used completely changed in July to only San Juan Chama water. So now the city's using its own San Juan Chama water and giving the county back San Juan Chama water to start paying back down on this debit, let's say, from the city perspective, or this credit from the county perspective. And that is something that is something that's being done at the BDD actively. But what the shared pool allows to happen is that this credit, and so in November, it went back to using native water. And so the county's credit started to build up again. And the shared pool allows this credit to go into next year, essentially. And there's all sorts of kind of equations and things on how we figure this out. But the takeaway is that the city and the county have figured out a way to kind of share their resources at BDD to make them more resilient for both. That's a new idea. So I'm getting kind of close to the lower Santa Fe River piece, but if anybody has any questions about that piece, I'd be happy to take them here. This is the only slide I have on the BDD shared pool. Okay, and we can certainly come back to this in discussion. So now let me talk a little bit about the San Juan Chama return flow pipeline and the county's support for that, and some of the contingencies that the county has for supporting that, the pipeline. So I showed you earlier how we track where our water comes from, and therefore how much water that arrives at Paseo Real is from each of the different sources. The approximately 2,700 acre feet per year that has arrived there from 2013 through 2019 is the water that we want to peel off and send back to the Rio Grande, so that instead of releasing, so that we can release essentially this much less from our reservoirs in Heron and Abiquiu and make our San Juan Chama water go farther. Now that actually ties into what the county is doing on the El Dorado pipeline side of things. Let's see, did I skip? No. Well, let me say one other thing. Clearly, if we peel away, so in the last, from 2013 through 2019, there was almost 6,000 acre feet of effluent. And some of that went to purple pipe to non-potable reuse, about 1,300. And so there's still, we're talking about, could we peel away this 2,700 and send it over to the Rio Grande? That's clearly a threat to the folks on the lower Santa Fe River, La Cienega and La Bajada. On the other hand, La Cienega, in my sort of mental model of all this, is more threatened by groundwater overuse than by La Cienega is not downstream of this, so that it's a different threat. And what's interesting is if the county is able to essentially bring river water to El Dorado and Canyoncito, there's a potential for reducing the groundwater impacts in this sort of up gradient area, which would in the long run be beneficial to the La Cienega area. So these two things are now sort of tied together. The El Dorado pipeline in some ways ties together the return flow pipeline and hopefully in the long run, some recovery to groundwater levels in the La Cienega area. Sorry.
Hey, Jesse, can I ask a
Sure.
question about that?
You bet.
Yeah, great. This is Erin English with Biohabitats. That reduction of groundwater impact, I'm assuming that that's primarily from pulling people in El Dorado, Canyoncito off of groundwater supply wells, but does that also consider the fact that most of them are on septic systems and that there might be some return, or is that through groundwater discharge, or is that not part of your thinking?
Well, no, that's a good question, and I haven't really thought through it. I'll sort of take a stab at it. There will still, so there's not, at this point, there's not a sewer system being developed to go with this. So the septic systems will be, whatever septic return is occurring now will still continue, but the groundwater extraction should be reduced.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if anyone's looked at, this is a little bit of an aside, but just at the effectiveness of that recharge, because that's sort of an interesting, because now you're taking water, and discharging it over there. It's not coming back to you from the wastewater treatment to the wastewater treatment plant in the same way.
Right. No, I think it's interesting, and it shows how all these things are kind of tied together, and the more you get in, the more complicated it could be. I mean, I could imagine, and I don't know, I know that New Mexico Tech, or the Bureau of Geology and Minerals has done some really good work on groundwater levels in the La Cienega area. I could imagine in a perfect world, a groundwater model, which was accurate enough to show us, how does the groundwater work its way from the mountain front over here in the east towards La Cienega, and where would you get the biggest bang from your buck by stopping groundwater extraction there, and then focus, your development, your pipeline in such a way. At this point, the pipeline, I think, is just going to offset the groundwater pumping in El Dorado in their big supply wells. But you can also see there's this whole section of the greater Santa Fe area between the city limits and this pipeline that is all served by wells, to my knowledge, that ultimately, and I don't know how long it would take, but you could imagine some reality where at some point this was also served by a utility and could ease the pressure on the groundwater system that's working its way towards La Cienega. So this is relatively new. I don't know if folks on the call are aware. I'm sure some are, but probably most are not. But as of this month, the county has formally supported the San Juan Chama return flow pipeline. The piece of that I wanted to pull out for this group is the sort of conditions upon which that support are tied. So the county's partnership on this project is predicated on a thorough environmental impact statement, a comparison of alternative strategies, and the garnering of public support. We plan to work with the city to study the environmental impacts on the lower Santa Fe River and to conduct a public process to understand community concerns and develop potential solutions together. This includes a commitment to evaluating science-based target flows on lower Santa Fe River to help mitigate the objective impacts at the heart of many community concerns. So this is the first sort of formal, I think, promise to sort of engage in some sort of a planning process on the lower Santa Fe River. So that sort of.
Can I jump in? Sorry, Jesse. This is Carrie Olson. I just wanted to make sure it's clear, the county didn't like pass a resolution or completely support it. They support continuing to explore, and that's a key word there, is continuing to explore the project. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so in that very first sentence, continuing to explore a joint venture of a return flow project. Thank you, Carrie. So that brings me to my final slide, and sort of discussion topics is the potential impacts of all this on the lower Santa Fe River. The NEPA piece you guys dug into last week, so I don't think that we need to rehash that. I think Bill knows more about it than I do anyways. And so I don't really have more to say about that other than that is something that's coming is what are the environmental impacts of peeling away that San Juan Chama portion of water? That's something that is going to be studied, and it's going to be studied soon. That's coming in the next couple of months. And then sort of this lower Santa Fe River planning process, and that's a piece that's hard. It's hard for me to speak to because it's bigger than the water utility. It's bigger than the city water utility. It's bigger than the city by itself. It's city, it's county, it's the traditional communities, it's the pueblos, it's this group, if any group, it's the Watershed Association that in some ways it may have a role to play as I don't know what you'd call it, hopefully an unbiased sort of gatherer of all the stakeholders or something like that. But it's big, and so it's hard for me to try and drive it because it's bigger than I am. But we are speaking for the water utility. We are open to it. We're ready for it. We think it's something that needs to happen. And then understanding that folks will probably want copies of these slides, and I'll send them, and understanding that this is being recorded. Here are some ideas, and again, these are just ideas. These are not necessarily things that I can promise you right now, but these are ideas coming from me as to things that may end up being considered in this planning process. I think in the NEPA we may end up with some flow targets related to environmental concerns on the river. I think in this planning process, and we do also understand that there are senior water rights in the lower river. So I think that the idea of some minimum flows for agriculture is probably something that ends up there. One idea that I've never even put this down on paper yet, and I'm not sure I've really expressed it to too many people, so you guys get to be the first, but the one of the interesting things about the living river ordinance is that it's tied to hydrologic conditions based on the April forecast of how much water are we going to have. And it varies from 300 if it's a super dry year to 1,000 if it's above some threshold. I could imagine some idea of what about additional flow target? What about flow targets on the lower Santa Fe River above some minimum threshold that were tied to San Juan Chama water in storage? So the thing that the city utility is trying to protect ourselves from is some point in the future where we don't have enough water. Now, if we've got some amount of water in storage in Abiquiu and in Heron, we can't say that that we need more, right? Like at some point, maybe there's a place there where if we're above some threshold, we start to put water back into the lower Santa Fe River. So that's an idea. I think both of those sort of bring into the mix the tangled sort of potential, not conflict, but there's a little tension between water released to the river that is slowed down in beaver ponds and doesn't make it to the irrigators. So that piece will have to be sort of, I think, hammered out if we're going to seriously consider flow targets, to the river. And then ideas here also is one of the things that's interesting. I'm sure you all understand this better than I do. Is that the wastewater effluent discharge is pretty constant throughout the year, and it's the irrigators need it in the summer. how do we take advantage of that winter effluent? Right now, as a city, we're basically saying, well, we will try and manage so that we're mostly using San Juan Chama water in the winter so that we can return it and take advantage of it that way, and use our native sources in the summer so that there's returns going to the lower Santa Fe River. But is there more that could be done? If you have a field and a little well, could you divert during the winter into a pond and have it soak into the ground all winter and then have that water available to pump out in the summer? Those sorts of solutions, I think, there's potential, maybe there's an opportunity for some funding and to come from the utility to help out with that. I don't know. These are ideas. These are not solutions. These are, just throwing out some things there for grist for the mill without making any promises. Similarly on the conveyance, I don't know what it's like. I know that Mr. Cooper was talking about or maybe it was Ms. Cooper was talking about this acequia being 1.5 miles long. I don't know what that acequia looks like, and would it be helpful if that acequia were lined? Those sorts of things, like maybe there's some potential for matches there for people who want to do things like that. So those are my ideas. I'm pretty sure that's the last slide I have. And so I will stop the share so that folks can see other folks. And and then I'm happy to bring the slides back up if need be with questions.
That was really informative, Jesse. Thank you. That was, the slides are excellent. I think I feel like I understand this so much better than I have over the last 1.5 years. So thank you. That was really, really great. And I also want to express my gratitude for you coming up with some ideas, because obviously the lower watershed, there have been so many things tried and so many things not honored and so many things worried and there's just a lot of worry and consternation. So thank you for being creative with some of those ideas that maybe we can come up with something out of that, So it's great grist for the conversation mill and the possibility mill. So who has questions for Jesse?
I do.
Bobby?
So Jesse, when you were in your idea section, the main thing that was not addressed is there's an enormous amount of new construction going on in the city. And as I understand it, there is not a whole lot of focus on where that water is going that people are using. There's some large buildings, there's apartments, there's condos, there's homes. There are a lot of paved areas, parking lots that are, have been put in so people can put their vehicles there. And as we know, more paved surfaces do not add to the groundwater. It runs off and goes, it probably goes into the sewer mostly. And that's not very useful in terms of, it eventually goes into the ground, but anyway, so I would like to know, maybe this is also for Andrew as well, but what has the city done to address where this water is being used by these new structures? Tell me.
I think maybe there's two questions there, and one of them is where's the water coming from that people are actually using inside these new developments, and another one is what about all the stormwater runoff associated with the impermeable area associated with these?
Well, actually, no, not the first one, because I know where the water's coming from. It's coming from all those sources that you brought up, right? So I want to know where it's going to go when, when somebody is,
okay,
from their roof, from their whatever.
Stormwater is not. I don't focus on stormwater, but I won't dodge the question. I will give you a few ideas. And I know that there's an active stormwater management program that Melissa McDonald is working on in a different part of the city. Now, there's nothing worse than asking someone who works for the city a question and having them say, that's not my job, that's somebody else. So I will say, there's a few different things here. First of all, that stormwater doesn't go into the sewer system in general. They're separate systems. It should mostly end up in the arroyos and in the river. I think that there's an argument to be made, and I'm not an expert on the sort of groundwater hydrology of the Santa Fe area, but there is an argument to be made in the desert that if you want recharge, you're probably better off getting this water into an arroyo or into a river in certain places than not. So now I'm not saying we should pave the city to try and get water into the arroyos so that we get more recharge there. But if your overall goal is recharge to the region, to the sort of water table, I'm not sure what the balance on that is. I think there's a lot of good reasons to hold that water up and trying to get it in to infiltrate locally. And those are probably mostly related to erosion and water quality. But in terms of actual recharge, I'm not sure how the balance there works. That might be as deep as I can go on answering, but I'd be happy to keep stabbing at it if you like.
Well, that's really, thank you, but I already know that pretty much. What about gray water?
Andrew, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I guess gray water for the most part is sort of something that we talk about relative to new construction or for outdoor use, right? To sort of reuse water that was once used outdoors, and then some new buildings, I suppose, could plumb with that kind of water on the inside. At this point, gray water basically goes back, it does go to the sewer. That's what's in the sewer for the most part, that and the black water. And that's what goes back and becomes the return that we're talking about that goes into the lower Santa Fe River. The Water Conservation Office has been kind of working to try and get incentives and to work with the building inspectors to be able to do more gray water stuff. And it's getting better. I don't think it's particularly because of the Water Conservation Office. I think it's because the plumbing code is making it a lot easier to do gray water. And so as the land use department keeps adopting new plumbing codes, there are more opportunities available to do that. But I'm not aware of a whole lot of use of gray water other than sort of showers and laundries that people are using the outflow for outdoor watering.
Okay, and then Andrew, I guess this is you as well, but the parking lots. We have an enormous amount of permeable surfaces, which and are black and are heat sinks, and we can't do that. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's something we're trying to address. So at the risk of getting really off topic, because Jesse's really got this nice presentation, but just a quick aside here. There's a Water Conservation Committee, and it's one of the priorities is trying to address that. There's a member on the committee who really is a representative of some significant landowners along St. Mike's who are people with gigantic black parking lots, and they're looking for solutions for how to work on the infiltration from that. And the priorities have gotten a little slowed down and changed this year because we haven't had meetings like normal, but we really have a member on the committee who's focused primarily just on that. So we're hoping to tackle it because of all the reasons you just said. Those are big problems. Is that helpful?
I'll just throw in something too, if I could. Andy Otto with the Watershed Association. So we just completed, I believe it's 28, I call them pocket rain gardens at Santa Fe High School student parking lot to capture about 500,000 gallons of water a year on average and infiltrate it back in to the aquifer as opposed to having it run into the Arroyo Chamisa. So we use the rain gardens and we'll continue to develop those as a way to do, I'm going to say aquifer storage and recharge, but not an active system like they have in Albuquerque, which is literally pumping it back into the aquifers.
Thank you, Andy.
Can I add a comment here? This is Erin English again with Biohabitats. Is that this is a very interesting conversation because what we're seeing elsewhere and what is such a challenge for so many municipalities when you're contemplating these 80 or 100-year water plans is this idea of the one water approach. And so, Jesse, I don't know, I do know that there's been some conversation of that idea within the city, but really unifying these disparate parts. around that water planning. And I don't know if in the 80-year water plan process that you're contemplating, that the one water strategy has come, to the surface. But, the U.S. Water Alliance and some of these big water advocacy organizations have really been helping municipalities like Santa Fe to improve the ability to do one water unified planning around reuse and recharge and stormwater and wastewater, so that it's not so separated.
I'm aware of the one water approach. I do think we are certainly all about it when it comes to wastewater. That's why we're focused on the return flow pipeline. When it comes to stormwater, I push back a little bit. I think stormwater is an important thing to manage, and I think if we can use it as much as possible to offset non-potable or potential outdoor use irrigation, that's fantastic. And in that way, it can offset potable demand. But I haven't seen, and I know Albuquerque looked at it, and Bruce Thompson gave a talk that I found very compelling. It's a huge challenge to try and figure out how to get stormwater directly into our potable portfolio. But insofar as like Andy's talking about, if we can use it to water trees and offset some of our demand, and that's a fantastic attempt to basically bring some portion of stormwater into the portfolio if you can. Maybe I would say indirectly.
Great. Any other questions out there?
Well, yeah, I do. Andy, go, Andy.
I'll just throw in the one thing that we haven't really talked about with so much of this is water quality below the wastewater treatment plant. And we heard from Patrick Longmire a couple of times, and the different pharmaceuticals in our wastewater, I think is something that we're going to be needing to deal with down the road, not today or tomorrow necessarily, but as we start counting this as one water, then we're going to need to bring those quality levels up. I've got a feeling. So I just want to kind of get that on the radar. Water quality is something that we need to keep in the mix. We talk about moving water around, and it's all great, and it's being conveyed here and there and sharing. And I'm thinking all the septic tanks in El Dorado are ending up in La Cienega wells. And so that's the kind of stuff where I'm overreacting. So.
Karen, Carol?
Yeah, I'd like to definitely, I think that that's an important element for those of us who are downstream water rights users and all the way down into the pueblos. And I'd like to echo Felicity's thanks for thinking about solutions to you, Jesse, and the department, because when we participated in the focus group meetings, or I can't remember what they were called, but we were concerned that there weren't a lot of answers about what the pipeline's impacts would be, except that it sounded like it would cut the water really substantially down here. And so, yeah, the flow. And so thinking about this going forward, we really hope that there is this joint kind of city-county, hopefully beyond exploration to actual solutions, because but I see that something happened out of that, so I'm pleased. Thank you.
And I'd like to point out, we are also senior water rights holders, as well as the federal government, our neighbor.
Yeah.
So I don't know how all that plays into this as well.
Yeah, that's another thing. The idea of lining the acequia. There are a lot of problematic areas along the acequia, but BLM is our neighbor, and they share the acequia with us. And so then you get into another level way beyond city and county to federal of all the different regulations and everything that go with that. So just like to put that into the mix, because that's the big piece of what's happening in El Cañon, and with, later on the discussion about the Rael Ranch. But thank you.
And I guess that's a question I have, Jesse, where you said there would be the lower watershed planning process. Is that in the future upcoming, you're figuring out how you might do that or include the communities? Or is that something you guys have considered that you've already done?
No, I don't think it's been done yet, but I don't know quite how to do it from my seat, I guess is part of, I have a meeting this afternoon with the mayor and one of the city councilors, and it's one of the topics on the agenda is, you know, this has been thrown out there. This is something that needs to happen, but how do we do it? And how do we, I think even at that level, which is obviously way above me, it's also like, we don't want to, the city does not, and I can't speak for anybody, but my sense is the city doesn't want to charge ahead and own this thing because it's bigger than the city. So it's a little bit, it's hard to, you know, it's kind of outside of everybody's normal, I don't know, it's hard to get a leader, I guess, to do this, to take this on. The city has probably the resources, but not sure that politically we can charge forward as we're going to try and solve this for y'all.
Hey, Jesse, this is Erin. Again, I'm sorry to keep butting in here. I echo also that idea that looking at the lower river flows, you know, similar way to the living ordinance it was done for the upper river is a great idea. And, you know, just to give you the perspective, I would be happy to talk with you on the phone, and I'm sure Felicity would as well. And there may have been other people on this call that were also involved with that process when we did the first round of the ordinance. But we led that technical work really hand in hand with the water department and the Watershed Association. And part of what I think made that so successful when Mayor Koss was there was that the river and watershed coordinator was the point person. And that the important piece that I think was such a cool process was that there was a really heavily concerted public effort to bring in community members for comments, but there was also a working group that had a diverse group of members on it, from everyone from like civic partnerships to banks to, you know, various safety associations and ecologists. And, you know, there was a diverse group of people who really helped craft what that ordinance is and what those technical requirements wanted to be that were like aligned with both community values, cultural values, and then ecological values and best bang for your buck in terms of how the water was going to perform. So that was how Mayor Koss proceeded, you know, back at that time. And I'm not suggesting it should necessarily be the same, but know that there was a pretty strong community working group of volunteers who really hammered that thing out with the water division.
Yeah, and we went into retreat. William was there. We went into retreat for a weekend and really just spent 8 hours on a Saturday and a Sunday and each day, and really hammered it out. It was an amazing process. Yeah, and then Claudia was sort of spearheading that, and Toby Hertzlig was the facilitator. And so, yeah, if you wanted to discuss how that might occur, I'm sure the La Cienega Valley Association would be a valuable partner in that too, and trying to, yeah. So there's a lot of folks out there who can maybe help diagram out how that might be. And I understand what you're saying. It's bigger than everybody. And also really super necessary for the lower part of the watershed to feel part of that process. Yeah.
If I can just throw in too, you all probably have heard it from Andy potentially, but the Watershed Association is just starting on a Bureau of Reclamation Phase 1 project to start getting stakeholder input. And I think we're hoping to make this project something that can support the city efforts to get a better idea of stakeholders throughout the watershed and provide this kind of one watershed perspective. So we'll probably start reaching out to you in January with more questions and things like that. But we're working with a social scientist who's an expert out of Utah State, who's going to help us kind of compile stakeholder input and information, and also stakeholder geography, and kind of hopefully bring together, you know, the city and the county and kind of support the efforts that you all are making, and bring some of that kind of social science expertise and bring together the input and hopefully get something out of that. So just wanted to throw that in there. I'm sure we'll be keeping you all updated as we continue working on the project, which will be happening over the next 2 years.
Thank you.
So in the same realm as that, so Jesse, is the city going to then work with Erin and maybe Felicity and the Santa Fe Watershed Association to create an advisory a working group that actually will come up with a beautiful way for all of these different voices to be heard? Are you going to do that? Can you do that?
Again, I believe that the city of Santa Fe Water has a role to play here, but I will stir the pot a little bit and throw it back at this group and say, why doesn't the Santa Fe River Traditional Communities lead this lower Santa Fe River effort? I don't think it's the city. It's definitely not the water division's role for us to lead that. I don't think. Maybe it's the cities. You might be able to argue it's the cities, but I don't think that the city leadership even feels like the city should be leading it, because it's bigger than the city. So, I think this group, if there's any group that potentially should be in charge, should try and run with this, I would throw out maybe it's this group.
Okay, why don't you suggest this to the mayor?
Well, we can figure out how best to do that. And when we meet with the mayor, we can, get a notion of that. But that's great motivation. Thank you. We'd like to have some relevance, and this is a great way
Well,
to
the county has already said, like, we're interested in continuing to explore contingent on some sort of a process occurring. So that it's out there. The city, this is a key sort of this project, the return flow pipeline is key on our water resources radar. And so we want to be a very willing participant to try and figure out, is there a way to make this work for everybody?
Yeah.
But we're not, I don't think we'll lead it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you hold the thought that water is much bigger than you and the city and the county, I think that will be much, that's the main, that's our main concern. So hold that thought. This is about a water hood, we're in a water hood together. So if you think of it that way, that would be great. I do have a question though, when you're talking about piping water to El Dorado and then potentially to other places, and in doing that, but not having a moratorium on new wells. Am I correct about that? I don't think there is a moratorium on any new wells in the city or county. Is that correct?
No, in the city, you can't get a new well if you're within, I think it's 300 feet of a water line.
Sorry,
in fact, you can't deepen a well if you're within 300 feet of a water line.
Okay, but you can dig a new well?
No.
If you're further than 300 feet away from a water line, or it would be more expensive for you to connect to the water system than to drill your well, you can drill a new well.
Okay.
Jesse, thank you for being with us. Is there anybody else? We're starting to run on time here. We have a few more things to get through. Anyone else? Nope.
Well, thank you all for your attention and your questions. I appreciate it. I'll stay on in the background in case something comes up, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you very, very much for coming. Appreciate it. Okay, so we've got a lot of possibility ahead of us to have some influence there, and it's very encouraging, I'd say. All right, so our next agenda item, treatment plant discharge compliance update. We don't have Efren or Mike with us, so we will, does, Andrew, you don't probably know anything about that. So, no problem. And so we can move on to number 4, BLM El Cañon Rael Ranch Management Plan. Andy, do you want to cover that from Carl's notes? Just what he overviewed, or Carol and Kier, maybe you know something about that.
I was going to say Carol and Kier were right more on the, they're right there. So
You guys want to give us a quick, I mean, you sort of mentioned that that took place and that you submitted some comments. I guess we're expecting a plan in the next few weeks after they collected the public. What's the word? Gosh, where are my words?
Public input.
Input, thank you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say in the next few weeks, everybody. I mean, we all know how fast the federal government moves. I mean, they purchased the ranch in 2011, and we're finally getting around to try and get some public input
January.
to, to what's going to happen with the long-term management of the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
What they proposed, I don't know if any of you know this, is they had 3 alternatives, an A, a B, and a C.
Okay.
And A was basically opening it up to the public with some restrictions, as well as alternative B. Some of them incorporated more grazing options, some less, some access to the river for watering points. It was pretty involved. And then C was basically just to open the gate to the ranch and just let everybody run wild throughout the whole ranch and just sort of leave it as it is and not really do anything. So, a number of us all commented. We personally actually would like to see a combination of alternative A and B, and we were against alternative C because we didn't want to have it just become a theme park down here.
Mm-hmm.
There are issues with parking and access, and the road down into the canyon is a county road, but it's impassable in bad weather. And we were concerned about school bus tours coming down here and getting stuck, and fire access. There's a lot of issues that we felt weren't really addressed in any of the alternatives. So we tried to address them as best we could. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's all in process now. And we're just kind of waiting to see what the federal government decides to implement, which plan or how much will blend, of all the 3 plans together. I don't know. You want to add anything, Carol?
They said they were hoping for January to have some resolution on this. So we are crossing our fingers on that as well. But one of the things that is already in process is to make the ranch a National Historic District, right, which would then provide a number of protections in a lot of ways, including environmental and the river, since it's totally surrounded by the river and fed by the river. The acequia is fed by the river, so that's a possibility, but we're really not sure where it's going to go. But they seem to be on the order of really looking at protection from the standpoint of its uniqueness historically, environmentally, how it feeds the whole valley, in La Cienega Valley and further on, all the way downstream from treatment plant and beyond. So that's all we know for now. We haven't heard any kind of update on it, but we really appreciated being able to work with Andy through this too, to look at the different elements that are part of the watershed in terms of how the valley contributes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to add that BLM has formed a cooperative partnership with Cornerstone's Community Partnerships. And Cornerstone's has been doing a lot of research on the old ranch house and trying to figure out when it was built, what needs to be done to basically kind of restore it and keep it intact. And also they're working on ideas of restoring the holding pond for the ditch, the irrigation ditch, and also looking at what can be done to fix the bad sections of the acequia that are way beyond repair now. So Jake Barrow, who is the former ED, I think there's a new executive director now, is still a project manager, and he's pretty involved with all these different facets of what's going to happen with the ranch for the moment. They have a 3-year agreement with BLM, so we'll see where it goes from there.
Right.
And that's basically kind of all we really know about it at this point. If anybody has any questions, we'll answer them as best we can.
That's
Sorry.
exciting, though.
Or
That's
Andy.
very exciting. The Cornerstones piece and the fact that they actually collected public input and are in, your hit is that they're gonna do a conservation thing. So we'll see.
We will see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Andy, did you have anything else to add about that?
No, except for we were brought in, actually Jake Vero again with Cornerstones brought us in to look at the earthen pond, quote unquote,
Mhm.
which is kind of interesting in the orchard and stuff like that. So we submitted our comments as well. I
Okay,
think
great.
William.
Yeah, William.
And, you know, the Rael Ranch is very dear to people in Agua Fria because many of them are related to the Real family. So, you know, we'd be interested in what happens very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the one watershed whole notion. Yeah. Okay. Great. Number 5, Eldorado Wells update. We sort of got that from Jesse, but Andy, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, actually, I was going to see if Maria's on too. She may have a county update on, and Carrie's still on too, on what the county is doing on their piece of that active piece, the supplying water to Canyoncito and kind of dropping off some at El Dorado along the way. Any updates, Maria? Or?
Hi, Maria.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I triple booked myself this morning.
Excellent.
But I'm here. I don't have an update for you. All I know is that the Canyoncito water project has gone out to bid and went out to bid, and I believe a consultant was selected over the summer. So that's all I know about that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Carrie, do you have anything to add to that? No? Okay. All right. Yeah, I think things are happening more slowly in these days. If that can even be possible.
Yes, that's absolutely the truth. Things are happening very, very slow on our end.
Yeah.
Especially related to the procurement and contracting.
Uh-huh. Okay. Thank you though for adding that. That's great. All right, next on the agenda, Educational Committee update. Andy, do we have anything to update on that?
Nope. We kind of incorporated it in, so
yeah. Okay. All right. Other matters, anyone? William? Oops, you're on mute, sweetie.
Well, this is something that I had kind of thrown out to just Carl and you and maybe Bobby and Andy, that, you know, we know Los Alamos Labs has their report that like in 45 years, the San de Cristos will be treeless. And so therefore they won't maintain a snowpack. You know, what kind of plans can we think of to address that? And so what I was thinking is that, well, if it's kind of treeless because there's not enough moisture, like the 35 inches a year to support firs and, you know, evergreens, you know, and what are we going to do if that snowpack, like every time we get a snowstorm, within a week or two, it's just going to melt and run into the river. You know, do we need to, you know, I was thinking of terracing the land and, you know, forcing it into the river and maybe another reservoir or something like that. Because otherwise, you know, you're not going to be able to save that moisture.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I guess that 45-year thing was already what 2 or 3 years ago. So we're,
Yeah, or 5 or something.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you know, I mean, this could probably be done by the terracing or whatever could be done by like AmeriCorps. I mean, you know, kids would love to do that type of a project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm not even sure of what I'm saying is feasible or if it's just total insanity or whatever.
But it's something that is applicable to the long-range water planning process for the entire watershed. And it's an important piece. I mean, that's that whole climate change piece, and that's that whole changing ecology and increasing the complexity of what we're dealing with. Yeah. So that,
So so with but I think Andrew is still on, but and Jesse, maybe this applies to him as well, but in terms of what William was speaking about, and you, Felicity, we also need to be adding more native shrubs and plants and trees and planting. And this is something that kids really want to get into. I work with a group called Global Warming Express. They're elementary school kids. We had, last year, we had a donor who wanted to give the kids trees. The mayor couldn't get it together to, the city. I don't know who it was specifically the mayor, but the city couldn't get it together to work with the kids to plant the trees. So that never happened. So really, that is a way to hold water, to support wildlife and diversity. And so, Andrew, what's going on there?
I can speak to that a little bit because I remember that project, and there's been another project since where there's a donor who wants to put in a whole lot of trees. And one of the things we're really trying to make sure happens is that all those trees survive. I guess there's been some history of that not quite working out, right? Getting them planted is great and everybody feels good about it, but somebody's got to come back twice a week and water it for like a decade.
Right.
And that part's a lot harder to work out. So, at this point, I think the plan is that we're really trying to focus on rain gardens, like the ones that Andy was talking about earlier, and opportunities to sort of plant trees that are going to benefit from, not benefit, but be able to basically survive on infiltration. I mean, of course, there's some watering, I imagine, to get everything kind of established, but that we can not be doing this for 10 years, but rather for a year or two, get these things established and be able to support them off of rainwater. So it's definitely on the radar for the city. There's been a lot of information and studies about, there was a fascinating one in the New York Times about like increased length of life in neighborhoods that had been owner occupied because those people had put in trees. And it was one of these interesting things because, now 100 years later, the neighborhoods are kind of I think they're all fancy in New York now. But there's this huge impact, right? Decades later from the planting of trees. So we've been having meetings about it a lot. We've been trying to address that with a group that includes some of the people from solid waste. So they've been kind of working on it because the sustainability department is located over there. We've also got a project going to look at pollinators. The city's trying to pursue some kind of designation as a good city for native bees and to have some stuff to promote all of that. So someone said it and everybody echoed it. Things are moving slower than ever, but we are kind of moving in different directions. And that's one of them: more trees and more bees.
So this is Maria. I just want to echo what Andrew was saying. We're having those same conversations on the county side about planting more trees, figuring out how we plant them in ways where they can survive, and that might be, as Andrew was saying, not necessarily out in nature, but in neighborhoods, in rain gardens. One thing that we are doing on open space properties is looking at drainages and northern slopes and things like that, and trying to find areas where our open space staff or even volunteers wouldn't necessarily have to go out and water. We're also having lots of conversations about pollinators and native plantings. And so, you know, we're trying to figure out these things slower, yes, but we are looking for those opportunities. It's really just the long-term maintenance that is a challenge. We have had success planting things in the past, you know, getting community members to come out and help us plant, but the longevity and the survival rate of those plants has not been good. So we're having those conversations to figure out a better way to continue the stewardship of these resources.
Great. That is such an important part of it, because anybody who goes up and down the river, you know, downstream from Frenchie's Field or at Frenchie's Field, and sees all those beautiful cottonwoods that people put in, and there's just these dried twigs now, and it's so frustrating, even, you know, right there in the river. So it's a really important consideration, and so that's great that that's part of the process there. Yeah.
Wait, I have one more thing about this, but so the curb cuts are really critical. And Andrew, I know that you told me before that the city will go out and put in a curb cut. But why don't you have a little group of volunteers called the curb cut patrol or something, and they can go around and identify places that are needed, where curb cuts are needed, and then actually get the city to do it. Because you know, like there's a really clear, obvious one at the post office on Pacheco. There's some big trees there, a curb cut right there. But you know, like, how about that?
Yeah, so we're working on one project that's sort of like that. I remember one of our goals with our planning that we'd identified through the water conservation input we collected a while back is that everybody has really great solutions for places that they go a lot, right? Like you send your mail at the Pacheco post office, and so you've been there a few times after it rained and noticed that there's this puddle, and have a solution. So we're trying to figure out how to kind of access that information from people, because it's out there, right? We all walk our dogs someplace, and we wish the city would do something about the one easy tweak they could do, right? So we have these neighborhood pilot projects that we're working on. That's part of the sustainability plan that the previous mayor and this mayor, I guess, both kind of worked on. And so one of those projects is working in Nava Ade, and we're working on this extremely technical approach with the Public Works group and with Intera, which is a group of really sophisticated, I don't know, scientists and analysts, looking at how much potential there is for infiltration and how we can increase infiltration and support some more plantings around there. So we're working on one of our neighborhood pilot projects on this very tech heavy side. And on the other one, we're working with a guy who has one of these plans, right? He has a road end right by his house, and it collects all this water, and it's full of mosquitoes after it rains, and it's a disaster. And he has a solution for it. So we're working with him on kind of implementing specifically, you know, this series of curb cuts and a couple of plantings to see how that goes, and kind of taking a lower tech approach. So that's on the list on our scorecard for next year to get finished. So hopefully I can come back and tell you guys more about those as they play out. But yeah, so we're kind of coming at that from two sides, trying to deal with those problems. I shouldn't say problems, those opportunities. How's that? Yeah.
Okay.
William, and unmute, yeah.
Okay. You know, now I'm not going to remember. Oh, Kim Shanahan, about 6 months ago in his article in the New Mexican, he wrote about how there was a plan to build more retention ponds at Frenchie's Field. And I've never heard about that before. And then Jesse Roach just mentioned something about, you know, some ponding along the river. And I don't know if that's in the, you know, in the upper watershed or what, but, you know, well, I think it would be beneficial, but we've never really had that discussion.
So I just caught the tail end of that, and I might not be fully in the conversation, but I did want to throw out to the group that one of the things we're looking at at water is potential aquifer storage and recovery along the Santa Fe River. And one of the ideas that has been thrown out is, could you create some infiltration basins, at Frenchie's and get some credit for recharge there? It's just an idea. It would certainly need a lot of vetting from the community, and we'd have to take it through the state, but it has been mentioned. It's something that we're kicking around.
Yeah, Jesse, I mentioned that it was in the article by Kim Shanahan probably about 6 months ago.
Yeah, the problem with that was storing stormwater for more than an amount of time. Yeah, those ideas, I like the idea. Out of the box thinking is sometimes where the next big idea comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was actually saying when the river floods that there would be little overflows into these retention ponds at Frenchie's Field.
Yeah, I actually missed that article, but I have heard him talk about there's sort of a development neighborhood that they're working on called Dos Acequias that's kind of just up, not upstream, but up Acequia, and those acequias sort of function like storm drains in that section of town. So when it rains, a lot of water comes through those. So that's actually, I'm mentioning it because there's it's another place that there's kind of construction. It sort of has a lot of the situations that happen when you build something out. So that's a place also where we're kind of, I shouldn't say we, but the water division is working with looking for a solution to try and kind of mitigate some of those impacts and also do some water conservation. So there's an old tank that we have that's been sitting unused for years, and we're trying to figure out if we can collect, if the neighborhood can collect rainwater. I think the issue is probably whether we can just give the tank to a neighborhood or not. But the goal would be to use the tank to essentially collect roof water off a whole bunch of different roofs around the neighborhood and use it for sort of a small irrigation system within there. So
right.
I'm kind of hopeful that something like that can, actually reduce the impact on the acequias at the same time that they're doing some construction, instead of, even better than just mitigating the impacts, to kind of turn the table on that a little bit. So.
Very interesting. You guys have a lot of cool things going on, both city and county, and it really is helpful to hear about that. And I mean, we all recognize the complexity and how to coordinate all the people who want to be involved. And Bobby obviously has a lot of good ideas, and it's hard to integrate sometimes citizen, assistance into bureaucracies, but here we are. So I appreciate everybody's efforts and everybody's ideas and everybody coming to this particular table here for the lower watershed. There isn't anything else on the agenda other than other matters. And if anybody has anything to bring up, now would be a good time to do that. In addition to some of these things already brought up. Nothing. I've lost a few people. No.
I watched some of the older videos that you guys had recorded, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And there was a mention of a field trip down, in the lower water river, and I would just put my name in the hat to participate in that. Maybe this spring you guys could hold one. I would learn a lot. I've been on the roads, next to the wetlands, but I've never been in the wetland or really got a good history of what the issues are on the ground. So I would just recommend you guys organize that.
Thank you. Good, good. Thanks for rekindling that. Yeah, we had put that out. We've had some incredibly wonderful tours where everybody learns a lot, and that's a good thing to reinstate. And we will, as soon as we can safely gather and safely talk. And I mean, being outside is obviously better, and we could be 6 feet apart, but yeah, springtime, we'll get that on the agenda. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah. All right, y'all.
And we would be happy to be a part of that, and working with the BLM folks on how to facilitate that at the ranch too, if that was of interest.
Great, Carol. That would be a great stop. along the way, and to have somebody there to talk about it and have you guys there, that would be fantastic. Maybe we could stop there for lunch. Maybe you guys could cook up a nice banquet for us or something. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I'm joking, of course.
I hope
But
so.
no, that's great. Thank you. All
Sure.
right. Yeah, Carl and I will get on that. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody being here. I think Jesse jumped off, but many thanks to you, Andrew and Jesse, for both being here. It's always really helpful when we have city and county folks together. And Maria, thank you for joining us, even if it was late. And Jennifer, thank you for bringing in that side of interest. And I do have a question. In our last meeting, there was a student that joined us who's one of your students. I think he works at the wastewater treatment plant there.
Right.
Has he come up with a topic? Have you guys?
We're still trying to narrow that down. Jesse
Okay.
and a couple of members from the city, and then some of my faculty colleagues, we proposed some things, and we're trying to play up to his strengths and see where we can how we can define a project that's good for him, where he can be learning from, but making contributions to the different types of topics that you guys are interested in.
Yeah. Oh, good, good. Well, keep us posted on that. There's
Okay.
plenty of topics to study in our own little watershed. All right, you all. Well, thank you. Everybody have good, safe holidays. Stay healthy. Take care of yourselves. Lots of vitamin C. Thank you, Andy, for driving the Zoom call. Aaron, thank you for your comments. Everybody, thank you so much. And we will post you next year. Oh my gosh, can you believe we're saying that? Next year. Yay! Really appreciate it. Yeah. And we'll see you again in February.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Felicity. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Mm.